Good evening, everyone. Today we are going to talk about the trade and exchange networks that existed during the reign of Sikandar bin Ilyas Shah, and we will be doing a numismatic analysis of this so that we can try to understand how the trade and exchange networks operated in medieval Bengal, in the Bengal Sultanate. So first we will have a brief background of the Bengal Sultanate and try to understand the context that we are talking about. So it is around 1244 CE that Muhammad Bakhtiar Khalji is said to have invaded Bengal. So there are some literary accounts which tell us that the last Shena ruler of Bengal, Lakshmana, was dethroned by Khilji's invasions, and this somehow marks the beginning of the Sultanate in Bengal. However, till the middle of the 14th century, Bengal was largely under the hegemony of the Delhi Sultanate. So this is also the time, if you remember, that the Delhi Sultanate is emerging as an important power in Delhi and in North India. And you have the early dynasties like the Ilbaris, the Khiljis, and the Tughlaqs, who are ruling over large parts of North India. Now, it is only in 1342 that Shamsuddin Ilyas Shah of the Ilyas Shahi dynasty comes to power in Bengal, and he proclaims himself as someone who wants to break free from the hegemony of the Delhi Sultanate. So Shamsuddin Ilyas Shah is then marking a break in the Sultanate. However, it is Firoz Shah Tughlaq who invades Bengal, and especially to curb the growing power of the Bengal sultans. So there are two invasions that are led by Firoz Shah, one in 1353 CE and one in 1359. Now, in 1353, Firoz Shah was able to, for the time being, defeat Ilyas Shah, Shamsuddin Ilyas Shah, and establish partial hegemony over Bengal. But that was only a temporary victory, because when he came back in 1359, the Sikandar bin Ilyas Shah, who was a successor of Shamsuddin, was enthroned, and he gave a tough battle to Firoz Shah. So Firoz Shah was eventually defeated, and he had to go back to Delhi. The rule of Sikandar bin Ilyas Shah started from sometime around 1357, and this was till 1390 CE, around 1390, and this marks the beginning of an autonomous hegemony of the Bengal sultans. And here I have provided brief genealogy of the Ilyas Shahis. So Shamsuddin Sikandar bin Ilyas Shah, then you have Ghyasuddin Azam Shah and Shihabuddin. After this, there are other sultans who rule over Bengal. But again, we see from around 1410 CE that Bengal really comes under the hegemony of the Delhi Sultanate. So this is briefly the history of the Bengal Sultanate. And we will be mainly looking at Sikandar bin Ilyas Shah and his coins. So this is a map of medieval Bengal. This is taken from Richard Eaton's book. And here you can see the principal political centers in Bengal. Now, when Sikandar bin Ilyas Shah was in power, the seat of political power in Bengal was Pandua. So this was known as Firuzabad, and Pandua was a very important political center for the sultans of Bengal, from where they were operating their power, and from where they were also challenging the might of a large number of regional kingdoms. So Pandua therefore emerged as a very important mint town as well as a prosperous trading center in this period. So what was the economy of medieval Bengal like? So there were two parallel strands in this economy of Bengal, one that consisted of silver trade and the other which consisted of trade or exchange or circulation of cowrie shells. Now, this is an important point that we need to keep in mind, because most of the coins that we will be looking at were made of silver primarily. But that doesn't mean that silver was the only metal in circulation, because cowrie shells was also an important component of the trade. And historians like Ranabir Chakravarti have pointed out that cowrie shells were being exchanged and carried over long distances, even in overseas trade with Southeast Asia. Important to remember is that silver was not locally available. This was being imported from outside. So the coins that were being made in the Bengal Sultanate were made in silver, but silver was not locally available, which sort of hints at the important role that these coins would have played in the economy of Bengal, and also the political significance of these coins. Otherwise, why will a sultanate mint coins in a metal that is not locally available? So where was this silver coming from? Now, as I have already mentioned, that an extensive network of trade and exchange existed in medieval Bengal. This trade was conducted both overland as well as overseas. And there were several sources from which bullions were coming in, from which silver was being imported into Bengal. A part of this was obviously coming from the military conquests and the war booty and plunder, but a lot of this was also coming from the surplus that was generated out of trade and a vibrant local economy that existed in Bengal. So in Bengal, we had a large number of exportable goods that were being produced, such as the silks, and these were then generating a surplus, which was used to sort of finance the purchase of bullions. So this is a map that has been published in Hussein's paper, where we look at the principal trade networks of medieval Bengal. Now, here, if you see this map carefully, and I will probably come back to this map when I'm talking about the exchange networks of Bengal. So it is under the Ilyas Shahis that we see the regional kingdom of Bengal expanding and consolidating the arteries of trade and control over trade both by land and by sea. So this is a period when trade really gets consolidated and comes under the control of the Sultanate to a large extent. So what were the sources of silver? Since silver is used to mint coins in Bengal, so where is the silver coming from? Silver is coming from Yunnan in southwest. It is coming from the northern Shan states of China. It is coming from eastern Burma, and it is also coming from Malacca. It is also important to remember that these were areas where silver mines existed in plenty, and silver was also produced, refined, and exported in these areas, from these areas. Now, the silver that came from China would ultimately reach Bengal directly or indirectly, either in exchange of other commodities or directly, and it would come via Kamrup in the northeast, and Tripura or Srihatta in the east, and Chatgaon in the southeast. Now, Chatgaon, it was an important area in the southeast, which is also known as Arakan in some sources, that was a port city of sorts. In some Chinese sources, Chatgaon is mentioned as an important center from where silver and other goods would pass and would be exchanged over large parts of East Asia and Southeast Asia. Within the subcontinent, silver was also coming from Gujarat and the Coromandel coast through some Portuguese trade interests in textiles. There were some Portuguese merchants who were probably procuring cotton and silk textiles, though this is happening in a much later period. We also see overland trade links that existed with other parts of northern India. So, what were the items that were being used to purchase silver? Now, it is important to remember that silver was something that was not staying within the economy of Bengal for a long period of time. The Bengal Sultanate needed silver to purchase horses and other war animals. These horses, especially a special variety of horse called Tangan or mountain horses, was coming from the Tibet region, the Tibetan Chinese border. And this was coming into Bengal via Kamrup and also a Brahmaputra trade route and also through Tripura. This horse or these horses were then being sold in Bengal as well as in Bihar. So it is important to then understand the role that these horses were playing in the economy of Bengal, because as I've already mentioned, the Sultanate in Bengal was constantly engaged in military expeditions and consolidating itself. So these horses were probably needed in a regular supply so that they could be supplied to the armies and they could be used to undertake various expeditions. And these horses could only be mostly purchased in coins, so horses were not purchased in exchange for other goods. So it is important to remember that coins were largely being minted to facilitate the purchase of horses. Now, what are some of the mints that were in operation during this period? So we come across 8 mints that operated in the early Ilyas Shahi period, especially in the time of Sikandar bin Ilyas Shah. Of these, the first 5 were the most important ones. I've already mentioned the importance of Firuzabad and Chatgaon. Firuzabad was a political center and Chatgaon was an important port through which trade was happening not only with East Asia but also Southeast Asia. Besides that, Sonargaon, Satgaon, and Muazzamabad were also important. Shahre-Nau, Cholistan Urf Kamrup, and Janatabad, these were the ones that were at least temporarily in operation, and these were located in areas that were not under the complete control of the Bengal Sultanate. So, for example, Cholistan Urf Kamrup was a mint that was operating from Kamrup region, and Kamrup and Kamta areas in Assam were never under the complete control of the Bengal Sultanate. These were areas that would always sort of assert their authority from time to time, and these were areas where only temporary control could be established. Now, this is a collection of the Ilyas Shahi coins of Sikandar bin Ilyas from the National Museum, Delhi. And if we try to, so there were several series of these coins that were being minted. And one of these important series of coins that I encountered was the Al Mujahid series of coins, which were also very commonly being minted in this period. Now, if we read the legends of these coins, then what do these legends read? So, Yamin Khalifat is a very common term that is used, which means the right hand of the caliph. Amir al-Muminin would mean a leader or commander of the faithful, and Wal Muslimin would mean friend of the faithful. So these epithets are important because when we compare these coins with the coins of the Delhi Sultanate or the ones which are being minted even later in Bengal, then these terms don't really appear on a large scale. These also tell us that the Sultan or the one who is minting these coins are probably referring to the Caliph and also trying to address to a Perso Islamic audience. So you're not only looking at audiences within your own locality or your own region, but you're also trying to reach out to a Perso Islamic audience that exists beyond your area of authority. Similarly, terms like Shah is being used here, and Shah is a term that we don't find a lot also in the Delhi Sultanate coins, which would probably indicate that it is a claim to a greater political authority and also establishes the ruler of Bengal to a status which is not otherwise available to him. Now, we were trying to understand the kind of trade that existed using some of the fine spots of the Sultanate coins. So I chose to look at Assam and areas in and around Assam. So some coins were found at Guwahati, Naugong, Shibsagar, and Karimganj. Then there were a hoard of coins which were found at Rajaduar, which is in northern Guwahati. And these are the pictures of those coin finds from Sutpa Sinha's work. It is also mentioned that these coins were a hoard that consisted of a mix of other coins. So there were Sher Shahi coins, and there were also, in some cases, Mughal coins that were inhumed together. Probably this indicated that these coins were being used by the people as a means of exchange in the locality, along with several other coins over a period of time before they were inhumed. These coins were minted at Firozabad. Now, in the Tezpur District Museum, two Sikandar Shahi coins were found, which came from an unknown provenance but were donated by a person who belonged to Arunachal Pradesh. So these coins that have been found are not only Sikandar Shahi coins, but there are other coins of other Ilyas Shahi rulers, and there are mixed hoards. So there are Mughal coins, there are Sher Shahi coins, and there are also coins of the Dakhan Sultanate, which probably tells us that these were areas which were not completely under the control of the Sultanate, but these were probably areas that lay in the trade routes that existed between Bengal and other parts of East, Southeast Asia. And that is something that we have already looked at, that the Brahmaputra Valley, as well as the route that passed from Kamrup, were important corridors that existed in the trade that was operating between Bengal and East Asia. Other find spots include Koch Bihar. There were coins which were found from Bara Rajpur, Khulna, which were then presented to the Patna Museum and are in the Patna Museum's collection. The ones that were obtained from Khulna were also interesting because Khulna was also an area that was not constantly under the control of the Bengal Sultanate. Similar finds were reported from Kushmandi hoard, which was from Malda and South Dinajpur. These coins were being minted at Firozabad, Satgaon, and Muazzamabad. Now, the coins which were found from Khulna and the coins which were found from Kamrup had this particular legend, which was basically Cholistan, and Cholistan has been taken to mean the land which supplies rice in plenty. So it has been conjectured by some scholars that Kamrup was a region that was famous for wet rice cultivation, and it was a rice belt. So probably Mulke Cholistan, or land of rice, was an epithet that was used for coins that were being minted at Kamrup and nearby areas. And Kamrup was probably an area that came under temporary control of the Sultan. So probably Sikandar Shahi coins from Kamrup were commemorative in nature. And these were probably used to establish the temporary authority of the Bengal Sultan in this area. Now that we have looked at the trade relations that existed and also looked at the sort of the fine spots of the coins, then it becomes imperative for us to understand, or to look at the kind of conclusions that we can draw from this. So, as I already mentioned, that the title Shah is found in several of these coins. And probably this indicates a tendency on the part of the Bengal Sultan, especially Sikandar Shah, to break from the authority of Firoz Shah Tughlaq and from the authority of the Delhi Sultanate. The use of the title Shah would also indicate addressing to a larger audience that consisted of a Perso-Islamic audience beyond the realm of Bengal. So these coins were probably ones which were not only being circulated in the local economy of Bengal. So as I mentioned that coins were used to purchase horses. So horse traders and horse dealers coming from different parts of East and Southeast Asia were taking away these coins. And those who were coming from Arabia were also taking away these coins. And some of the coin was being retained back in the local economy. because these traders would then purchase some of the important luxury products that were available at Bengal. Um, However, these titles like Shah are also found in some of the inscriptions that were used in the Adina Mosque, which Sikandar bin Ilyas Shah had constructed as a monument that would be larger than many of the Delhi Sultanate monuments of that time. So the intended audience of the coins is a question that we need to think about, because these coins have a large quantity of silver in them. This has been borne out from archaeometallurgical analysis of these coins, which would mean that they were high value coins. And also they carried a lot of these Perso-Islamic legends, which were not always in Bengali. So we can also then question that how many people could actually read and understand and decipher the meaning of these legends that were there on the coins. From a later period, that is from the reign of, say, Raja Ganesh in Bengal, we actually see Bengali legends coming up in the coins. So that would probably be something which would be more understood by the people at a local level. However, we also know that people were retaining some of these coins in the local economy. And as I've already said, that we can look at these coins of the Ilyas Shahis as a tool to express the sovereignty and break free from the authority and hegemony of the Delhi Sultanate. Because Delhi Sultanate was a political opponent, and Delhi Sultanate was a constant threat to the autonomy of the Sultanate in Bengal. So the Bengal Sultanate was issuing these coins, which were heavier than the Delhi Sultanate coins in many cases, which were of different denominations, and which had these inscriptions that made claims to authority which even the Delhi sultans were not making. So I would like to end my presentation here. And these are a set of readings which you can look at.